Hello there, I'm Luca Ricci and I'm a composer. In today's lesson, we will talk about close keys modulations. What are close keys? The expression closely related keys indicates tonalities that are close to each other in the circle of fifth and key signature, being relatives or keys with one sharp or flat added or removed. For example, G major is closely related to C major, as it adds a sharp, the F sharp, and as it's next to C major in the circle of fifths. The close relation between those tonalities also counts for the relatives of the close keys, albeit a little bit farther. For example, D minor is the minor relative of F major, which is a close key to C major being one flat distant. That makes D minor a closely related key to C major. Why are close keys so important? The distance between the tonics of the close keys is always of an ascending fifth, a descending fourth, or a descending fifth and an ascending fourth. Historically, these are very strong and important relations. We can find examples of these relations in the fugue, the contrapunctal form that defined the Baroque period in which the subject, a melodic line with clear and defined intervals and rhythms, is presented in a voice, and then followed by another voice who plays the answer, the same melodic line in the dominant tonality, which is up a fifth or down a fourth. Another example of the importance of this relation is in the classical period sonata form, in which the first theme is played in the tonic key, while the second theme, after a modulation segment of the piece, is played in the dominant key. In functional harmony, those close keys represent the main function of the tonality, the dominant, 5th grade, and the subdominant, 4th grade, and the relatives, 3rd grade for the dominant and 2nd grade for the subdominant. All this brings us to the question, why is it important to modulate? Like in nature, the tonal practice contains conditions that are both static and dynamic. The static condition exists in the fact that music doesn't get far from a determined group of notes and diatonic distances between those notes. In this category, our ear and our sensibility groups most of 16th century music. An aspect of our conception of tonality is to consider a piece of music in a determined tonality declaring a single tonic for the entire piece. Tonal composers, however, are convinced that, from an aesthetical point of view, a piece should not stay in the same key unless it's very short. All the compositions of a certain length uses notes that does not belong to the diatonic scale of the key in reference and at least changes one time key, adopting a new tonal center to which the new scale refers to. This process is called modulation, as the act to change your tonal center to another. It's important to make a distinction between modulating to a tonality and passing through a tonality. Passing through a tonality means that you don't confirm the new tonic center and the tonality you're hearing is only temporary, while modulating to a tonality means that you confirm the new tonic center and the new key you're hearing is important and plays a role in the structure of the piece. From a psychological perspective also, modulation is very important. Our ear and brain have a saturation limit after which the listener stops paying attention to the piece. When maintaining the same key and group of notes for a long period of time, the brain easily gets bored and stops listening actively to the piece, switching to a passive listening experience. To assure a certain level of attention, modulation is one of the tools that does the trick. Changing tonality and using new sets of notes creates a strong formal signal, and the brain intuitively recognizes the cues and starts to pay attention again to the song. However, it's important to not abuse of this system, since if you throw too much new information in a constant way, you obtain the same effect as if you throw too less. What are the main ways to modulate to closely related keys? We can identify three main ways to modulate to close keys: by chromatism, by using a progression, or by using a chain of modulations. Let's take a look to some examples, some originals and some historical. The fastest way is by chromatism and consists in transforming one of the grades of the scale in the dominant of the new tonality. To modulate to the fourth, you simply turn your tonic into the dominant, creating a first species 7th chord on the tonic. To modulate to the fifth, you instead turn the second grade into the dominant of the new tonality, with often the help of the seventh. This concept also applies to all the other close keys. To modulate to the sixth, you turn the third grade into the dominant of the relative minor. To modulate to the second, you turn the sixth into the dominant, as it is for the third, turning the seventh into the dominant. In Baroque music and classical period, the progression is another common method of modulation, and consists in a module that gets repeated at least 2 times identical, ascending or descending, by a specific interval. By its own nature, ascending or descending, the progression becomes more and more intense in terms of harmonic tension and usually leads to a cadence, which becomes a formal cue in the piece. For example, in the Four Seasons by Antonio Vivaldi, in the fourth concert, L'Inverno, first movement, the section that corresponds to correre e battere i piedi per il freddo is basically one big modulating progression that also acts as a modulation chain that starts on the first grade in F minor, modulates to return back to F minor. In this other example by Johann Sebastian Bach, the second fugue of the first well-tempered clavier, we can see how the three voices engage in a progression using the head of the subject alternating in the soprano voice and in the middle voice, while the bass voice plays a descending scale that complements the other two voices, modulating from the tonic key of C minor to its close key of A flat major, which here, in reality, it's the subdominant of E flat major, the relative of C minor, which will come a couple movements later. In this example by Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, we can see that right after the exposition of the first theme in the tonic key of the piece C major, a progression starts on the highest voice, playing a fast scale that descends every time the module repeats, going from C major to D minor, as we can see with the C sharp leading tone in the scale of D melodic minor, the second grade of C major, that by chromatism then becomes D major, with a passing seventh, to modulate to the fifth grade of C major, G major, the dominant, to play the second theme of this sonata. In this example by Ludwig van Beethoven, the sonata number 19, in bars 45 to 51, a modulating progression ensues, bringing us from E flat major to the fifth of C minor, a G major chord, a first in C minor, which goes to the fifth of G minor, a D major chord, which resolves to G minor, and in the next bars makes more other cadences, fifth to first, to confirm G minor, only to restart the modulation process later. In the elaboration part of a sonata, it's very common to not stay in a tonic center too much. The chain of modulations, or modulation chains, is another method to modulate and maintain a strong feeling of tension and is used both to modulate to close keys and to modulate to far keys. In this little original example, we are in C major and we are chaining modulations, both chromatic and progressions, to pass through different keys in order to generate tension and return to C major. It must be noted that in examples I applied the figured bass, but it would be correct only on Vivaldi, which wrote the figured bass himself, since it's not a practice used by classical composers. The inversions are a result of counterpoint and should be thought as such, not as a result of a chord-by-chord thought. Dissonances, such as passing notes, appoggiaturas and sustains, are the results of the different voices' melodic contact. A good counterpoint always results in a good underlying harmony, and as such is very important. In the next lesson, we will cover far keys modulations. See ya!